The Los Angeles County Courthouse was a place of order and decorum, starkly contrasting the chaos that often brought people through its doors. On this particular morning, the air in courtroom 12 was tense. The case of Tiffany Halstead, a wealthy socialite known for her lavish lifestyle and disregard for rules, had drawn a small crowd. Tiffany, dressed in a designer suit and oversized sunglasses, sauntered into the courtroom 20 minutes late, her heels clicking loudly against the polished floor. She didn't apologize or acknowledge the judge as she sat at the defendant's table. At the bench sat Judge William Grant, a distinguished black man in his late 52s, with a reputation for being firm but fair. He watched Tiffany with a calm, measured gaze, his expression unreadable. The charges against her were serious: multiple parking violations, reckless driving, and endangering a pedestrian, a 65-year-old man named Edward Lopez, who had been struck while crossing the street. Tiffany, however, seemed unfazed. She leaned back in her chair, scrolling through her phone as if this were another inconvenience in her privileged life. "Mrs. Halstead," Judge Grant began, his deep voice cutting through the room, "you are charged with reckless driving, multiple parking violations, and endangering a pedestrian. How do you plead?" Tiffany sighed dramatically, as though the question were beneath her. "Not guilty, obviously," she replied, her tone dripping with condescension. "This is all a huge misunderstanding. I mean, it's not like I meant to hit anyone. The guy came out of nowhere." The courtroom fell silent. Judge Grant's eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice remained steady. "Mr. Lopez suffered a broken leg and multiple bruises as a result of your actions. Do you understand the seriousness of these charges?" Tiffany rolled her eyes. "Look, I'll pay whatever fine you want. Can we just get this over with? I have a charity gala tonight and I need to get my hair done." Judge Grant leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "This is not a matter of money, Mrs. Halstead. This is about accountability. Your actions put someone's life at risk, and your attitude suggests a lack of remorse or understanding of the consequences." Tiffany scoffed. "Oh, please. It's not like I killed anyone. Can we move on?" The tension in the room was palpable. Judge Grant took a deep breath, clearly choosing his words carefully. "Mrs. Halstead, your privilege and arrogance are not a defense. In this courtroom, everyone is equal under the law, and your behavior will not be tolerated." Tiffany opened her mouth to retort, but Judge Grant raised a hand, silencing her. "You will listen, and you will show respect. This is not a negotiation." He then outlined the charges in detail, emphasizing the impact of Tiffany's actions on Mr. Lopez and the community. Tiffany, however, remained defiant, crossing her arms and muttering under her breath. Her lawyer, a nervous-looking man in a too-tight suit, tried to intervene, but Judge Grant was unmoved. "Mrs. Halstead," Judge Grant said, his voice firm, "your reckless behavior and blatant disregard for the law have consequences. You will pay a fine of $10,000, complete 200 hours of community service, and spend 30 days volunteering at a women's shelter." Tiffany's jaw dropped. "A shelter? You can't be serious. Do you know who I am?" Judge Grant's expression didn't change. "I do. You are a defendant in my courtroom, and you will comply with this sentence. Perhaps spending time with people who have faced real hardship will give you some much-needed perspective." Tiffany's face flushed with anger, but Judge Grant brought down his gavel before she could protest further. "Court is adjourned." The days that followed were a wake-up call for Tiffany. Her time at the women's shelter starkly contrasted with her privileged life. She worked alongside women who had lost everything, victims of abuse, poverty, and addiction. At first, she resisted, complaining about the conditions and the work. But as the days passed, she began to listen to their stories. She saw their resilience, their strength, and their humanity. One evening, as she helped serve dinner, a woman named Maria approached her. "You're not like the others who come here," Maria said. "You're here because you have to be, not because you want to be. But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a chance for you to see the world differently." Tiffany didn't know how to respond. For the first time in her life, She felt a pang of guilt. She thought about Mr. Lopez, the man she had injured, and the pain she had caused. She thought about the women at the shelter, who had faced so much hardship yet still found the strength to keep going. And she thought about Judge Grant, who had seen through her arrogance and forced her to confront the consequences of her actions. By the end of her sentence, Tiffany was a changed person. She returned to her life with a newfound humility and a desire to make amends. She donated generously to the shelter and began volunteering there regularly. She even contacted Mr. Lopez, offering to cover his medical expenses and apologizing for her behavior. The courtroom had been a place of reckoning for Tiffany, where her privilege collided head-on with justice. Judge Grant's sentence not only held her accountable, but also opened her eyes to the struggles of others. It was a lesson in humility, empathy, and the true meaning of accountability. As for Judge Grant, he continued to preside over his courtroom with the same unwavering dedication to fairness and justice. He knew that the law was not just about punishment, but teaching, guiding, and transforming lives when necessary. And in Tiffany's case, he had done just that. The gavel had fallen, but the impact of that day would resonate far beyond the walls of Courtroom 12. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul Stories. Let's reach 1,000 subscribers together and continue sharing stories that inspire change and celebrate resilience. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next chapter of empowerment.